Hey friend, so glad you found me. If you're new here, please subscribe and share this video with someone who'd enjoy it. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I value every word. Let's begin. Jared had always been the picture of calm. Thursday evenings were his personal retreat. Mila, his wife, would head off to meet her friends, and he would relish the quiet solitude of an empty house. It was a ritual carved into their lives over the years, a seamless routine he'd never questioned. His faith in Mila was absolute. But that week, something disrupted the tranquility he'd always taken for granted. During a lunch break at the office, Jared struck up a casual conversation with Reed, a longtime coworker. Their chat meandered harmlessly, sports, weekend plans, random gossip, until Reed said something that landed like a bolt from nowhere. "Could have been someone else," Reed said offhandedly. "But I swear I saw Mila walking into a motel last week. Looked like she was with a mixed group. Girls, and some guys too." His tone was light, like he was mentioning a coincidence that barely mattered. He had no idea what he'd just ignited. To Jared, it was like lightning striking a clear sky. He laughed it off with forced ease, brushing the remark aside like it meant nothing. It had to be a misunderstanding. Mila wouldn't do that. She couldn't. But the damage had been done, a doubt had taken root, and it spread quickly. What once felt certain now wavered beneath him. In the days that followed, Jared couldn't stop replaying the comment. He clung to rational explanations. Maybe Reed mistook someone else for Mila. Maybe it was just a strange mix-up. But each attempt to soothe his thoughts only fed the unease. The suspicion refused to loosen its grip, and by the time Thursday returned, Jared felt fundamentally changed. That evening, Mila followed her usual script, dressing with cheerful ease, planting a gentle kiss on his lips, her tone sweet and familiar as ever. Everything appeared as it always had. But Jared didn't settle into the couch or reach for the remote. Instead, he waited, 5 minutes, then 10, his heart thudding against his ribs. Finally, he grabbed his keys and stepped out into the night. Anxiety, doubt, and guilt warred inside him. Maybe he was being paranoid, maybe he'd regret this, but he had to see for himself. He drove in silence, his focus sharp, heading toward the bar Mila typically frequented. He parked discreetly on a side street, a few blocks from the entrance. As he stepped out, his nerves coiled tight. The music from inside pulsed through the air, and neon lights bled across the pavement. The world outside was vibrant, loud, completely at odds with the storm churning inside him. He entered slowly, his eyes scanning every table, every figure in the crowd. The background noise, laughter, chatter, glasses clinking, faded into nothing. Then he saw her. Mila, drink in hand, was laughing, relaxed, unbothered. But what made Jared's breath catch was the man beneath her. She was perched on his lap, leaning in close, her smile easy and intimate. Time seemed to stutter. Jared stared, unable to believe what he was seeing. Yet the image didn't blur or vanish. Mila sat there as though it were normal, as though nothing about it should feel wrong. But for Jared, the ground had collapsed beneath him. He remained frozen, barely breathing. The room swayed, his chest tight with disbelief. Then he moved, slowly, deliberately, like someone walking through a nightmare. With every step, his mind screamed for clarity, for some better explanation. Nobody noticed him at first, until they did. Heads turned, eyes followed. And then Mila looked up. Her expression cracked for a moment, surprise, panic, guilt, before she attempted a smile. It was thin, brittle, fake. She stood up abruptly, smoothing her dress, casting glances at the people around her. "Jared, what are you doing here?" she asked, trying for lightness but failing to hide her nerves. He didn't answer. His gaze held hers, steady and unflinching, and the silence between them brimmed with every unspoken accusation. She gave a strained laugh, shrugging as though the moment could be dismissed. "It was just a joke. You know how I mess around." She gestured vaguely toward the man, clearly hoping he'd support her version, But Jared didn't move. His face betrayed nothing. He looked at her now with eyes that no longer saw the woman he once trusted. The warmth he used to feel in her presence had vanished. She stepped toward him, maybe to explain, maybe to plead, but he took a single step back. That movement, small as it was, said everything. She stopped cold, realization dawning on her face. The line between them had shifted, possibly for good. Around them, the bar's energy didn't falter. Conversations carried on, laughter echoed, drinks were poured, but at the heart of it all, something had broken beyond repair. Jared didn't ask questions. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stared for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. Mila stood rooted to the floor, stunned and silent, as if the walls had given out beneath her. She had seen this coming. Maybe not this night, this way, but she knew, deep down, that the consequences had always been close. And Jared, outwardly composed, his stride firm, felt himself unraveling with each step toward the door. Still, he never looked back. Whatever they'd built, whatever they'd shared, was behind him now, lost in the noise and dim light of that bar room. The night air hit him like ice the moment he stepped outside, but no chill could smother the wildfire of rage and heartbreak raging inside. He climbed into his car, hands unsteady as he struggled to turn the key. The engine rumbled to life, but he didn't move, just stared ahead, frozen. How had everything collapsed so fast? The moment felt surreal, like watching someone else's life fall apart. But this was his, and the betrayal was undeniable. Streetlights smeared across his windows as he sped through the city, his mind unraveling in loops of memory. He saw Mila's smile, the way she used to lean into him during quiet Sunday mornings, their whispered jokes and shared silences. All of it was now overshadowed by that gutting image, her perched on another man's lap, laughing like he had never existed. What else had she hidden? Were those late work nights just convenient lies? How long had he been blind? When he finally reached home, he drifted to the bedroom like a ghost, dazed and broken. The once inviting space now felt like a prison, walls closing in with every breath. Everything around him was soaked in betrayal, familiar, but no longer safe. His gaze settled on the closet. Her clothes still hung there, untouched, oblivious to the devastation, as if tonight had been nothing. But he knew better. This wasn't normal. Everything had been shattered. Without a second thought, he dug a suitcase from the back of the closet and started packing. Every folded shirt, every pair of jeans, felt like he was packing up pieces of a life that had just been ripped away from him. When he dragged the zipper shut, its sound sliced through the silence like a knife. He stopped for a moment, inhaled deeply, and let the weight of the night finally hit him. He was about to leave when his phone buzzed. He didn't need to check. It was her. Mila. The calls came one after another, desperate and unrelenting. For a moment, he hovered, unsure. Could she say anything that would make a difference? Still, he answered, needing to hear what scraps of truth she had left to offer. Her voice cracked with panic. "Jared, please. It's not what it looked like. I swear I love you. It meant nothing. It was a stupid mistake. Please, you have to believe me." She rushed out, as if the speed of her words could erase what she'd done. He didn't say a word. He just listened, a calm fury pulsing beneath his skin. When he spoke, his voice was colder than he expected. "Mila," he said evenly, "that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice, and choices have consequences." He ended the call without another word. With every plea she uttered, the truth became more solid. Whatever they'd had was over. He drove with no destination in mind. All he knew was he couldn't go back, not tonight. Not ever, maybe. The version of his life that had existed before that night had died at that bar table. In the weeks that followed, Jared lived in a haze of numbness. He rented a small apartment far from the place that now felt haunted. The blank walls stared back at him, reflecting the hollowness he felt inside. The silence wasn't just in the room, It echoed through him, heavy and full of questions he no longer had the energy to answer. He was trying to start over, slow and uncertain, without knowing what direction to take. But in that emotional vacuum, something new began to stir. A strange peace crept in. Where there had once been confusion and pain, there was now room to breathe, to think, to begin again. He created new patterns: morning runs before the city woke, quiet coffees at the corner cafe, nights spent alone, untouched by drama. For the first time in ages, he felt calm. Fragile, yes, but real. What he and Mila had shared had mattered. But it was finished. Still, she didn't let go. Her messages kept coming, missed calls, occasional texts heavy with regret. She said she was lost without him, that nothing felt right anymore. And maybe, in some quiet corner of himself, Jared had once wanted to believe they could fix it. Maybe, once, he would have gone back in a heartbeat. But that version of him, the one who would have forgiven so easily, no longer existed. Time passed. Then one gray afternoon, weeks after her last message, she came to him. It was raining hard when he heard the knock. He was in the kitchen, just plating his dinner. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, there she was. Rain soaked through her clothes, her hair plastered to her face, eyes swollen from tears. She looked nothing like the woman he used to know, just a shell, fragile and wrecked. "Can I come in?" she whispered, barely audible. He hesitated. Something stirred in him, some ghost of the love he'd once held. Slowly, he stepped aside. She entered, dripping and shivering like she'd been carrying the weight of the sky on her back. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Jared. I hate what I did. If I could take it back, I would. This wasn't how our story was supposed to end," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jared said nothing. For the first time, she wasn't hiding behind excuses. She wasn't performing. She was just shattered. He felt the ache of it, but it wasn't longing or rage anymore. It was something gentler, something final. He understood now. She was asking for something he no longer had to give. He crossed his arms tightly and turned his gaze away, deliberately avoiding her eyes. "We've changed, Mila. I'm not who I used to be." She stayed silent, waiting, wishing he would say more, but the words she yearned to hear never came. Whatever they once had fractured beyond repair. No amount of remorse could close the distance now. Mila, realizing there was nothing left to salvage, rose slowly from her chair. Her movements were careful, deliberate. Her eyes carried a sorrow too quiet for tears, a soft surrender to the truth. They were no longer connected. Jared, even as her sadness struck something deep inside him, knew in his core that this was the right conclusion. Some love stories don't end in fire or fury. They simply run their course. There's no turning back from that. When she stepped out and the door shut behind her, silence settled over his apartment like a heavy blanket. The faint click of the latch sounded like the last breath of something that had long been fading. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at the empty doorway, overwhelmed by a strange mix of grief and relief. Watching someone who had once meant the world walk out of your life, it was surreal. But there was also something unmistakably clear in that stillness. This chapter was done. In the days that followed, Jared let himself sit with the memories. He was no longer the man who had stepped into that relationship years ago. He had evolved beyond the version of himself that tolerated half-truths and stayed loyal to something built on fragile foundations. The breakdown of their marriage left its mark, but it also delivered a vital truth. Without mutual trust and respect, love is only a delicate illusion, and illusions can't hold up against the weight of real life. As time passed, he started to reclaim parts of himself he hadn't realized were lost. He rekindled old friendships that had faded, revisited passions he'd neglected, and, perhaps most importantly, began to recognize his own value again. In hindsight, he saw how much of himself he had poured into trying to hold together something that had already crumbled. One warm afternoon, while strolling through a nearby park, Jared paused to watch a group of children playing tag on the open lawn. Their laughter rang out freely, unburdened and wild, echoing through the air as they ran without care. That simple scene brought a smile to his face. It reminded him that the essence of life lies in those fleeting, uncomplicated moments. And bit by bit, he was rediscovering how to cherish them, something he couldn't do when trapped in the emotional ruins of a failing relationship. As he stood there, he recalled a saying his father often repeated when he was young. "Life's like riding a bike. You've got to keep moving or you'll fall over." In that instant, it hit him. He had stopped moving forward. For too long, he'd been stuck in place, held back by a relationship that had drained more than it gave. But now, he was ready. Ready to find momentum again. Ready to feel his feet turning the pedals beneath him. The months passed, and Mila never reached out. Jared didn't know where she had gone or what path her life had taken, and for the first time, he didn't feel the need to know. She had been a meaningful chapter, yes, but one that no longer defined who he was. The ache of betrayal and loss that once felt so consuming had softened, fading into a quiet memory, just another story from a life in motion. Then one bright morning, as he prepared to head out, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't burdened by sorrow anymore. There was calm in his eyes, a gentle stillness that spoke of healing and self-acceptance. He had relearned how to care for his own well-being, how to be content in solitude, and most importantly, how to recognize that love, true love, can't exist without respect as its foundation. Bathed in the soft glow of sunlight streaming through his apartment window, Jared smiled. He didn't need anyone else to make him whole. He had found peace within himself, and that, he now knew, was what truly mattered.